Hi everyone, and welcome to the fifth lesson in our English language reading GCSE revision series. If you haven't been on this channel yet, what we're doing is we're preparing you for the GCSE exams. And in this particular series, we're looking at the reading sections of your exams. So we're looking basically at the questions you have to do comprehension, the questions you have to do analysis, the questions you have to do evaluation, trying to do some model paragraphs for you as well to help you with those different questions that can come up. So if that sounds like something that will be useful to you, please consider, watching this to the end, watching some of the other videos that have been in this series. So far we've done language device analysis, word class analysis, structural analysis, ideas, perspectives, thoughts and feelings. That's a big one. A lot of the bigger questions look at the thoughts and feelings of the characters or the thoughts and feelings of the writer. Today, we're going to be doing a comprehension analysis / evaluation, basically compartmentalization. So we're going to look at how comprehension is one thing, analysis is another thing, evaluation is another thing. And depending on what your exam asks you to use will depend on the detail and what you include in your answers. So we're going to be looking at that today. As usual, I have got a little bit of an extract that we're going to read together and break down together so you can get a feel for this. But we'll start very simply with what these three terms actually mean. So comprehension, in simple terms, basically means just showing your understanding, having read something. So you don't even need, in a comprehension answer, usually to use quotes. You don't have to. So you just have to show that you have understood very basic questions: who, what, when, where, why. So, like, who is the main character? What are they doing? Why are they there? Very basic level. What is the setting like? How did they get there? Just very basic understanding. Then we go up to the next level, which is analysis. So with analysis, it's actually breaking down language or structure or both to explain something within the text. So these questions are normally more to do with single points of evidence that you break down. So, one of the classic questions is, how is language used to describe something, right? So how is language used to describe something? So you might pick out a word choice, which we've talked about in a previous video, or a language device, and you break down the language or the word choice, the connotations of it, all that sort of stuff. And then from that, you explain how the thing is being described. So, a question that came up a few years ago, it was on this mountain top sort of setting. And the question was, how is language used to describe the mountain area? And there's like this list of like pink and purple and red and yellow flowers. So that could be a quote that you analyze and you say, well, because there are these beautiful colors of pink and red and yellow, it has like this calming and beautiful effect, which suggests that the mountaintop is very beautiful and calming, right? So that's very different to comprehension, where you just say, the mountain had flowers on it, right? The mountain had flowers on it. Explain how the flowers actually describe the mountaintop. So that's breaking it down. And then you've got evaluation, which is the biggest one, which is the one we'll end up spending the most time on today. So evaluation is looking for trends within the data and making a judgment. Now, you might look at that sentence, you go, hang on a minute, is this an English lesson or a maths lesson, right? Because that seems like maths or physics, right? Or some sort of science. But that's still the case with English, at least on the highest level. So what you're doing in evaluation is you're looking at multiple quotes, multiple language devices, multiple word choices, multiple structures, maybe a combination of all of those. So some language structure and word choices together. And you're looking at what the trend of that together creates as an impression. So questions for this one will always be to do with either, the most common one is, to what extent do you agree? Which I often just put twedia. To what extent do you agree? Yeah. To what extent do you agree? So with this one, it might be, a student commented, the mountaintop is really beautiful. to what extent do you agree? And then you'd look at either the whole extract or a portion of it, depending on the question. Always make sure you look at where the lines are that you're meant to be reading and analysing and evaluating and comprehending, right? But let's say it's the whole extract, just for argument's sake. You would look at every way, every bit of language, every word, every structure that you can to try and work out whether the mountaintop was beautiful or not, right? So maybe you've got that image, like I said, at the list of like all the colors, pink and red and yellow and whatever I said, right? Pink and red and yellow and green, whatever I said. Anyway, that might be one image, but then there might also be like the jagged peaks, you know, loomed down and cast shadows, right? So that imagery, the imagery of the shadows, the connotations of that, the personification of the mountains looming down is very intimidating. So you might actually, and then let's say there's 3 other bits that you find. So you might overall say, actually, I disagree, or I only somewhat agree with this, because looking at all of the evidence that I can find from analyzing lots of bits of data, I actually don't think that the trend is it's all beautiful. Yeah. And that is the other thing I would say, just sort of pro tip, I suppose you might say. Pro tip, try not to fully agree or fully disagree. Always try, unless the question asks you to. If the question says you must agree or disagree specifically, then do what the question says, obviously. But if it's just to what extent do you agree, which is what it often is, then I wouldn't say, yeah, I totally agree, or no, I totally disagree. I would always try and be in the middle a little bit. Now, why is that? Because it shows the examiner that you're able to play devil's advocate. You're able to like look at both sides of the argument, right? And also it normally is true, like most pieces of writing aren't 100% black or white, or yes or no, or 1 or 0, right? They're not normally binary. They normally are more gray. So there's going to be good bits and bad bits, or clear bits and vague bits. So just bear that in mind. So now we're going to look at this piece of writing together, which is one of my favorite bits of writing, and try to work out what's going on with this in terms of comprehension, in terms of analysis, and then most importantly, in terms of evaluation. And the evaluation bit is the bit that we'll actually write a model for, right? So comprehension is pretty easy. Analysis we've been doing for the last few weeks. This week is more weighted on evaluation. So the question, and this would be very similar to some of your bigger questions in all of the exam boards. This one I've written is slightly more in the style of AQA, but they're all very similar. A student commented, "I feel really bad for Orwell." That's the name of the writer. "He didn't want to kill the elephant, but he had no choice in the matter. The crowd bullied him into it. To what extent do you agree?" So you see there's that twedia, right? Now in the AQA exam, this would be a 20-mark question, just so you know, 20-mark question for paper 1. If you're doing other exam boards, this will be one of the larger questions, or very similar to one of the larger questions. Now here we have 2 things that we have to agree or disagree with. So with the same as every other question, the most important thing to start with is looking at the question, working out what you're answering. So I feel bad for Orwell. He didn't want to kill the elephant. He had no choice in the matter. Yeah. The crowd bullied him into it. So he didn't want to kill the elephant. I feel bad for him and he didn't want to kill the elephant. That's the first bit. He had no choice. The crowd bullied him. That's the second bit. Yeah. So then what I would do in my exam is on the side, I would just write, sorry for Orwell, didn't want to kill, crowd bullied. Something like that. Yeah. So I'm just writing the prompts of the questions down on the side before I read. Now, hopefully you'll do it better than that, because obviously that wasn't great, but you get the idea. You write it on the side to prompt yourself. So let's read it. As we're reading it, we'll also try and comprehend it a little bit. But mostly we're looking for whether we agree or disagree with these two statements. So early one morning, the sub-inspector at another police station on the other end of town rang me up on the phone and said that an elephant was ravaging the bazaar. Would I please come and do something about it? I did not know what I could do, but I wanted to see what was happening, and I started out. I took my rifle, much too small to kill an elephant, but I thought the noise might be useful. Okay, so there's a couple of things straight away that we can sort of comprehend, analyze, and then start to come to our judgment. Obviously, we have to read the whole thing before we do our judgment, but we've got a few quite explicit thoughts and feelings here. I did not know what I could do. All right, so straight away it seems like he's vulnerable. He doesn't have a clear idea on this. He took a rifle which he believed was too small to kill an elephant. So again, this doesn't seem like he intended to kill the elephant at this point, right? But that the noise might be useful. So we get this idea that it's actually the reason he's doing it is not to kill the elephant, it's to scare the elephant away. It was not, of course, a wild elephant, but a tame one. It had been chained up, but on the previous night, it had broken its chain and escaped. In the morning, the elephant had suddenly reappeared in the town. It had already destroyed somebody's bamboo hut, killed a cow and raided some fruit stalls and devoured the stock. So this bit here, we start to see, there's this listing and all these little images of what the elephant has done. And this then maybe disagrees with the crowd bullying him into it, because he's listing reasons, like almost motives of why he might want to kill the elephant here, right? Because the elephant's causing problems. Some Burmese men arrived and told us that the elephant was in the paddy fields below, only a few hundred yards away. I sent an orderly to borrow an elephant rifle. So suddenly we've gone from his rifle, which was too small, to him sending someone to get a bigger gun. And it's called an elephant rifle. So we can infer from that it's a rifle intended to kill an elephant. The orderly came back in a few minutes with a rifle and 5 cartridges. Now, even just the imagery of the 5 cartridges maybe also shows a little bit of an intent, because, it's not like he's got 1 or 2, he's got 5 rounds of bullets to take this elephant down. As I started forward, practically the whole population of the area flocked out of their houses and followed me. So it's interesting that he uses like a little bit of animalistic imagery almost here, that the crowd that is forming are like almost sheep following him. If they're a flock, it's that collective noun flocked. That verb flocked has connotations of the collective noun of flock of sheep. They had seen the rifle and were all shouting excitedly that I was going to shoot the elephant. It made me vaguely uneasy. Short, simple sentence kind of emphasizes this point that maybe he doesn't want to kill the elephant. So maybe the rifle is more of a precaution. Maybe the cartridges are a precaution. See, we're somewhat agreeing and somewhat disagreeing as we go. I had no intention of shooting the elephant. Well, that's explicitly saying he didn't want to. Whether this is true or not is up to interpretation, because he did still get the elephant rifle, he did still get the cartridges, he did still send the orderly to get them, and he is still going to pursue the elephant, right? So you can't always fully trust what the writer says if what the writer is doing goes against it. There's this concept called the unreliable narrator, and this could be unreliable narration here, really, right? Because we're all biased and we're all like writing in a way that like makes us look as good as possible, really, if we're writing about ourselves normally. It's kind of like the writing equivalent of TikTok or Instagram, right? Like you try and put on like your best like selfie, or like you use filters potentially, or like get the best backdrop. Clearly I haven't done that today for my video. Clearly I've just got like a wonky camera, so I apologize for that. But generally we try and put our best face forward, so that it could just be that he's putting his best face forward here. I marched down the hill, looking and feeling a fool, with the rifle over my shoulder and an ever-growing army of people jostling at my heels. So this image of an ever-growing army is very interesting. It's a metaphor. the crowd isn't literally an army. But then in a way, it kind of is. Any group of people could technically become a sort of disorganized army. So we see that he definitely is at least somewhat intimidated by the crowd bullying him, right? Well, not necessarily bullying him directly yet, but intimidating him for sure. At the bottom, the elephant was standing 80 yards from the road. He took not the slightest notice of the crowd's approach. He was tearing up bunches of grass, beating them against his knees to clean them and stuffing them into his mouth. So we have this quite innocent image, really, beating the grass against his knees and stuffing it into his mouth. It's quite a sweet image in some sense of this animal. It doesn't seem to be wanting to hurt anyone. It's just sort of eating and chilling, really. As soon as I saw the elephant, I knew with perfect certainty that I ought not to shoot him. So that's pretty interesting as well. Again, it's this repeated sort of thought that he has of don't kill the elephant. So he starts with the wrong rifle. He doesn't, a rifle to scare him. Then he orders the right rifle, but then he says he had no intention of it and it makes him uneasy. The uneasiness can also be a little bit about the crowd, right? The crowd bullying him a bit or like intimidating him. And then he thinks that the elephant's kind of sweet, this little elephant, well, not little, but this elephant beating its grass against its knees and just eating. And he knows he doesn't want to shoot him. It's a serious matter to shoot a working elephant, comparable to destroying a huge and costly piece of machinery. So now we have another reason not to kill the elephant, the fact that it would be bad financially. At that distance, peacefully eating, the elephant looked no more dangerous than a cow. So this metaphor, comparing the elephant to a cow, cows are obviously quite docile creatures, they're quite sweet. There's maybe a little bit of foreboding in here because what do we do to cows? A lot of the time we slaughter them for meat, right? So maybe there's a bit of foreboding in here. I decided that I would watch him for a while to make sure he did not turn savage again and then go home. So this bit about going home, this has connotations of not killing the elephant and just getting out of that. But at that moment, I glanced around at the crowd that had followed me. It was an immense crowd. 2,000 at the least, and growing every minute. I looked at the sea of faces above the garish clothes. Faces are all happy and excited over this bit of fun, all certain that the elephant was going to be shot. So again, we've got quite a few things. An immense crowd, 2,000 at least, that would be very intimidating. 2,000 people is a heck of a lot. Growing every minute, so that adds even more to the sense of panic. The sea of faces above the garish clothes. So this imagery of a sea of faces is quite intimidating, like this huge number. And they're all happy to see this bit of fun, all certain that the elephant was going to be shot. Now that bit's interesting too, because even though he doesn't want to kill the elephant, you've got this huge crowd of people certain that it will. So it's harder and harder to be the person that stands up against a bigger and bigger crowd, right? It's like peer pressure, basically. They were watching me as they would watch a conjurer about to perform a trick, and suddenly I realized I should have to shoot the elephant after all. So that's quite sad, really. Suddenly I realized I should have to shoot the elephant. Now notice that that probably does agree with the crowd bullying him, at least indirectly, because it's as he looks at this growing crowd who know that the elephant's going to be shot that he realizes he's going to have to do it, right? It's nothing the elephant does. It's not a thing that he changes his mind. It's, oh man, there's a bigger and bigger crowd. I guess I'm going to have to shoot the elephant, right? Because there might be bigger trouble if I don't. The people expected it of me and I had got to do it. Here was I, the white man with his gun, seemingly the leading actor of the piece, but in reality, I was only a puppet, pushed to and fro by the will of the faces behind. So this is probably the most clear metaphor so far. He calls himself a puppet. So if you're a puppet on a string, then you don't have any control over what you do. You're at the mercy of the puppeteer, right? So this bit here is really clearly linking as well, I think, to the idea that the crowd is at least inadvertently bullying him into this. To come all that way, rifle in hand with 2,000 people marching on my heels and then to trail feebly away, having done nothing. No, that was impossible. The crowd would laugh at me. Now, this quote disagrees that the crowd is bullying him in some sense, right? Because the crowd haven't actually done anything. This is in his head. He's worried about how he'll look. Now, you don't need to know the context of the piece, but Orwell was in the British Army at this time, and this is a time of the British Empire. He's in Burma, which is now called Myanmar, and he's a British military police officer, basically, in this country. So the fact the crowd would laugh at him, reputation was everything to the British Empire at this point. They had to put on this front of strength. So he's scared, basically, to be laughed at. But it's also maybe his own pride. Is this him being bullied, or is this really his own stuff going on? I personally think it's more his stuff. I did not want to shoot the elephant. It seemed to me that it would be murder to shoot him. So the word murder has like serious connotations of like evil and sin. Somehow it always seems worse to kill a large animal. It was perfectly clear to me what I ought to do. I ought to walk up to the elephant and test his behavior. If he charged, I could shoot. If he took no notice of me, it would be safe to leave him. But I also knew I was going to do no such thing. If the elephant charged and I missed him, I should have about as much chance as a toad under a steamroller. The sole thought in my mind was that if anything went wrong, those 2,000 Burmese people would see me pursued, caught, trampled on. And if that happened, it was quite probable some of them would laugh. That would never do. There was only one alternative. And then we're going to leave it there. He does shoot the elephant, sadly. R.I.P. Nelly the elephant. So that's actually taken a bit longer than I was expecting. I've only got a very few minutes here to try and write out something quick for you, I'm afraid. But hopefully you get the idea of what evaluation looks like. The whole way through, we were also analyzing, we're breaking down what different bits mean. And then did you see I was trying to put it into a wider narrative or a wider judgment of I agree or I disagree. In this case, I think I did do a pretty good job of showing you that both of them I would somewhat agree. So then what you would do is you would say, you know, I somewhat agree that I feel bad for Orwell, or I somewhat agree that I agree with the comment that we would feel bad for Orwell. And it does seem that he personally did not really want to kill the elephant. So that could be our judgment for one of the paragraphs. And then what we would do is go into some of the evidence and we would sort of break down that evidence. Firstly, because Orwell starts off with a quote, rifle much too small to kill an elephant. And from this, we can infer that Orwell did not want to kill the elephant. Otherwise, he would have gone prepared with the right weapon. Later on, Orwell also uses the word murder when speaking about killing the elephant. This word has deep connotations of evil and sin. To kill something is bad. To murder has undertones of a true crime against the victim. However, we do notice that Orwell does send an orderly to borrow an elephant rifle. This action does juxtapose his words and at least leaves the option of killing the elephant open. And then I would go on to explain, you know, on balance, I feel that we sort of agree Orwell doesn't, and therefore we sort of feel sorry for him. And yeah, that's evaluation though. Do you see? We're forming a judgment, we're taking bits of evidence, we're weighing up whether it's agree or disagree. I can't do any more than that. I'm sorry about that. I've already overrun slightly, but hopefully that was helpful. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, please do comment or ask them down below and I will get back to you. And I will see you in the next one.